So why is the PMP exam so challenging? Well, there's four main reasons. The first reason has to do with the entire structure of the PMBOK, the structure of the PMI framework. The structure is not sequential. So it's really something that you can't just go step by step through as you might do in some other type of training. There's really a high degree of interdependence between the processes. There's 47 processes and there's 10 knowledge areas, and there's a lot of interdependence between them. So therefore, it makes it really difficult to learn one process without knowing the others. So we have a whole structure problem. The next reason is volume. There's a tremendous amount of volume of information contained in the PMBOK, which is the reference for the exam. There are 13 chapters, about 589 pages. There's 10 separate knowledge areas, and in those 10 separate knowledge areas, you're going to find 47 separate processes, and each one of those processes has what we call inputs, tools and techniques, and outputs, and those are the things that really characterize that process, and there are a lot of questions based on those. So there's really, if you look at all the inputs, tools and techniques, and outputs, there's about more than 500 of those to learn for the exam. So we really have a major challenge in terms of just sheer volume. The next reason is terminology. There are many specific terms and definitions that are used in the PMI framework that are specific to the PMI framework that you might not be using within your own organization, or you really haven't run across them that much in your projects. For example, organizational process assets and enterprise environmental factors. These two things are inputs to almost all of the 47 processes, and they're used quite often throughout the PMBOK, and you have to understand what these things are. So these are things that you have to learn as you study for the exam. So we have some terminology challenges. Other things like rolling wave planning, progressive elaboration, critical path. These are things you may have run across from time to time, but really may not be familiar with how they're actually using these within the PMI framework. Other terminologies would include what are the roles which PMI has in their philosophy, like, well, of course, the project manager, but also the sponsor, the team member, the functional managers. What do all these different roles have to do on a project within the PMI philosophy? So we have terminology issues. And then we have, finally, philosophy. So PMI does have a certain philosophy about how a project should run and what kind of decisions a project manager should make. And those may also be different from your current organization. And you're going to need to learn those philosophies in order to be able to answer the questions on the PMP exam. I once had a very experienced project manager take the exam after taking a PMP prep class, and he said that he had failed the exam even though he had a lot of experience and actually had even done a lot of studying, and the reason was he was answering the questions as he would have done them at work. He would read each scenario on the exam and say, well, what would I do at work? Well, unfortunately, that doesn't always give you the answer that PMI was looking for. It may be a good answer on the job, but they're actually looking for whether you understood the PMI framework, philosophy, and terms and definitions. So really you have to answer all the questions based on what would be the best way to answer this question based on the PMI philosophy, terms and definitions, and most importantly, the 47 processes which are in the PMBOK. So really there is a whole body of very unique information that you have to study for to be able to pass the exam. And that's really why this exam is so challenging. So based on the amount of challenges there are for preparing for the exam, I want to leave you with some recommendations for preparing for the exam. So first of all, go through the material more than once. We've said, as I previously mentioned, the material is quite interdependent, and there's a lot of connection between the processes. So the first time through, you really have to understand the architecture, have to understand the interdependencies, and that's going to give you a better judgment the second time through about what's important and where to store things in your mind when you're learning them. So what I recommend is that you read through the PMBOK or an exam preparation book before taking a boot camp. And there you're going to get a lot more out of any boot camp or any class that you take if you've been through the material at least once. Otherwise, you really don't know what's important, you don't know where to store things, and you don't fully understand the significance of the information that you're learning because you don't understand what it's connected to. So go through the material more than once. The next recommendation I have for you is do lots of practice questions. Practice questions confirm your understanding of the information. You can start with questions focused on each knowledge area, and that will help you to understand what you need to go restudy within that knowledge area, and it'll help you gain confidence in specific knowledge areas. Knowledge areas like scope management or time management or cost management. So you can start by getting a lot of expertise in these particular knowledge areas. Then at some point, you're going to need to take a full exam simulation. And in a full exam simulation, it's going to be like the real exam. It's going to be 4 hours, 200 questions. And each question will be presented at random where you don't know which knowledge area it comes from. And you really need to have been through all the material a couple of times before you move on to the full exam simulations. But you do need to get yourself up to that point that you can take a full exam before you take the real exam. That's also going to help you with the timing and the pacing of sitting for a real exam. So trying to understand, because there is a 4-hour time limit on the real exam, and you don't want to be in a situation where you've never taken a full exam and you didn't realize that it's going to take you 5 hours to go through a 4-hour exam based on your pace. So you wouldn't want to find that out in the real exam. So do lots of practice questions. And the next recommendation I have is decide what to memorize. And this varies on the person. Some people will memorize a lot of things. Some people will not memorize that many things. They're more about understanding the methods and what's going on in each process. But typically, people will memorize at least the key formulas and have them ready when they take the exam, and they'll sometimes memorize the 47 processes. In fact, you are given some time right before your exam starts. You have about 15 minutes during that time period, and you can actually recall on a blank sheet of paper in any order that you want the formulas and the 47 processes. So that's something that you can practice before taking the real exam, is recalling the information and then making sure that you have the information that makes sense for you. And the final recommendation I have for exam preparation is what I call the marathon mindset. This is an analogy that I'm using, like running a marathon. When you run a marathon, you have to work up to that marathon conditioning over many months. And you really have to be in peak running condition before you can actually run a marathon. And it's not something where intermittent starts and stops. If you don't run for a couple of months, you're going to get back out of shape and you're not going to be able to run a marathon. So you're going to have to keep that consistent training. Well, it's the same thing with studying for the PMP exam. It is a mental marathon, and intermittent starts and stops are going to hurt you because you're going to have to familiarize yourself with the information. So you really want to take a structured approach where you're studying according to a plan. You're studying a certain amount each week, and then you're doing an intensive amount of study right before you take the real exam, and then you're actually taking it so you don't lose the information and then have to restudy. So being in that marathon mindset is going to give you the optimal strategy for taking and passing the exam. And one more thing I want to leave you with: take it seriously. I don't know anybody that can pass this exam without studying. And finally, good luck on whatever you decide, and perhaps I'll see you in one of my courses in the future.